Go ahead, fire away.
Todd, with Josh Harvey Clemens being out first game, what adjustments, what are you going to do as far as that nickelback spot and strong safety there?
Well, Josh's a guy that in our base package has really been a strong safety, but he can play outside backer. He's played nickel like you talked about. Corey Moore's done a good job in spring. I think he's had a good summer. Excited about the things he's done. Shaq Fluker's a guy that just got here, so we're definitely going to be able to evaluate him and see his ability. Connor Norman's a guy that has really taken a leadership role with the back end and some of the 7-on-7 and stuff like that. So excited about his leadership and the things he's done. So we're going to evaluate all those guys at the safety position. Damien's a guy that really played nickel for us anyway. He's done it, really done it for 2 years. Not really been an issue. So we'll continue to give him some snaps there, and then to see how some of the newer guys, between Wiggins and Langley, those guys come along.
So could you play Damien at that nickel in a lot of sets, and like Sheldon or somebody's kind of number one guy?
Yeah, if you play Damien, really what you're doing then is you're adding a third corner. If you did that, then you're going to look and see how the new guys, Langley and Wiggins and those guys have come on and can play. So we'll kind of mess with it the first third of training camp to see how those guys progress. Because the big thing is to evaluate the players that we have coming in. We've got roughly, I think, 17 new faces on our roster from last year, and we want to do a good job of evaluating those guys early and developing the skill set of those guys, as well as the guys that we've got that have been here for a while.
You obviously, we're going to talk to Mike later. You two have absolutely opposite situations where you have so many new faces and so many new things you're trying to do, and Mike has so many old faces back. How does that change? How different is it from having like a veteran unit you had last year going into camp to, there's going to be some newbies that you got to get ready?
Well, I think every year you start over, it's the same from the standpoint of you're going to start from day one, and you're going to start with a basic fundamental approach. I think when you look at our team right now, defensively, like I said, I think we have roughly 17 new players that weren't here last year. And some of those guys got to come in the spring. I think we got a pretty good idea of what those guys can do. And the fact that they came in the spring, I think, was very beneficial to us and them. And I really don't, feel, even though they are freshmen, they've been through the system, for a spring. Got a good grasp on it, so they're going to get to do it again in August. The big thing is we need to evaluate the talent. Okay, that's the first thing. Evaluate the talent that we have. Then you got to develop the talent. Okay, and develop the talent. Then you got to define the roles for the players that are on your team and what they can do, and how they can help us win. And those are the things that we've got to focus on, as well as work on our conditioning and team building, and maintain our health.
Coach Grantham, there's a definite skill set difference in what Mike Thornton brings to the table as opposed to John Jenkins. How's that difference going to change what you guys try to do up front this season?
Well, first of all, Mike's a guy, we're not going to change what we do. Mike's a guy that skill set is his initial quickness, his ability to get into blocks, some of his change of direction. Guys like that could be a change of pace guy for you. When I was in Dallas, we had a guy named Jay Ratliff who was a different style nose than, Big John Jenkins. And he created, some plays that way. I think anytime you have players at any position, you're going to play to their strengths and allow them to do the things that they do well, whether it's be a move guy, whether it's be a knock a guy back and let guys play off of him, whether it be a penetrating guy and try to get one-on-one. So you're going to try to play to the skill set of the players up front sometimes. Mike's a guy that I thought had a good spring, and he's done a solid job this summer. Looking forward to getting him in camp along with Chris Mays and Atkins and some of the other guys to see what they can do. And we'll just have to see how it goes from there.
Toby Johnson will be able to roll out there on day one of practice?
Yeah, Toby's a guy that will be out there practicing day one. He's a guy that will probably play from the ends position. You know, he's got some athletic ability. He just hasn't done the system yet. So, you know, we'll just have to see what he can handle and how he progresses once we get him on the field to find out, you know, how much he can help us.
How do you have such, your first two opponents of the year, both important games, and they're such different opponents. How do you manage preparing for a spread team like Clemson, and then the next week, you know, you're gonna have such a different offensive team in South Carolina coming here?
Yeah,
You spend 29 days on Clemson and 3 on South Carolina?
I mean, it's really gonna be no different than any other camp that we've done from the standpoint of, you know, the first third of camp. You know, we need to evaluate our talent and find out what our pieces are and identify the players that can help us win and putting those guys in those positions. Then during that middle third of camp, you're gonna work on the SEC. I mean, you've got, you know, some tough games coming along. You know, obviously the first two are gonna be important, but we still got guys, you know, we have Florida in the middle there. We got Missouri, we got Tennessee that's new. You know, then you got Georgia Tech at the end, that's completely different too. And you're always gonna have different nuances each week. My approach and our approach has always been to, you know, introduce those guys to the things systematically, or the concepts that they're gonna have to have or understand to stop these style of offenses, okay? So during the middle session, you're gonna get ready for your season, okay? Then once you get to the back end there, that's when you start focusing in on the first game and, you know, getting ready for that. And I think that no matter who your opponents are, you know, you need to do it that way because you gotta be ready for the long haul. You gotta be ready for the entire season and the things that present themselves, you know, each week.
This being your, you know, fourth time through it, is there anything you learned in particular about the college game that you know, can apply now that maybe you didn't know your first year, anything that you do approach a little different now that you've been through it a few times?
I wouldn't say anything different. I think that you kinda got a feel for the style of offenses, you know, like we were talking about, whether it be a spread, a two-back, you know, the Georgia Tech option that you gotta face, which we actually saw twice last year. You know, the tempo, the hurry-up stuff that you're gonna see. I mean, you know, those things are kind of, you know, going on in college football, so you kind of prepare for those, and I think anytime you're doing them over and over again, for example, our veteran players have kind of done those things that we're gonna do, you know, this season, you know, already, so they kind of understand some of the concepts. So I think anytime you can have continuity in what you're doing, I think it gives you a chance to play fast.
What are you expecting to see out of Marlo Herrera this season? And he says he's moving faster in some of the workouts. I guess gotten maybe the type of shape he's looking for.
Yeah, I think Marlo's a guy that has really tried to take leadership role with that team. He's done a good job of not only being a hard worker for himself, but, you know, kind of being a guy that demanded that the other guys around him, you know, work the way he thinks you need to work to win an SEC East, you know, title and get back to Atlanta. I think he's done those things. He's a guy that has probably lost a few pounds. He plays I think well at the weight he's at right now. He's a guy that is going to be going into our system, you know, for the third time. I think allowing him to be stable in one position can be good for him, and what we want to get accomplished with him. I've been really pleased with the things that we've asked him to improve upon or do to become a better player. He's done, and I'm excited about the leadership role he can have and some of the things he can help us, you know, with what we're trying to accomplish with the defense.
Coach, you've got a plethora of experience, you know, college and pro now, coaching. Just in one of the off-season headlines from UGA, and Mr. Corson is doing more research on concussions, and like defensively over time, you see that, you know, more holding and more stuff gets called, you know, to make the game safer. where do you see those discussions and just the game evolving and in terms of?
Well, I think the biggest thing that you're talking about there is the defenseless player, rule that's in. It's obviously there. I think it's a good thing for safety of players. You still want to play aggressive and physical because you're still trying to protect yourself also. I think you just got to understand the rule, the target area, and how they're going to call it. And I think you can't put your head in the sand and say, don't worry about it, because it's there, and it's a part of the game. I think you just got to understand, what they're looking for, how you can play the situations that come up that could get you in those areas of being a foul. And I think you got to talk about it because you're talking about something that can happen in 1 to 2 seconds, and it's a pretty quick decision. It's sometimes spontaneous. So I think it's something that you got to address with the players and understand that it's obviously an emphasis in college football. It's for the safety of the players, and don't let it take away from your aggression, but understand here are the areas or boundaries that they're looking at.
Back to the freshmen, and you don't have much contact with them over the summer, but what's your expectations from the freshmen of knowing and understanding your schemes and your concepts?
We expect them to know it. I mean, we have, well, first of all, there's two types of freshmen that we have here. Meaning, the freshmen that came in mid-year, and then we have the freshmen that came in, in the summer. The freshmen that were here this spring, I think they've done it for, a spring practice, so they have a little bit of concept to fall back on. They have an understanding of it. Our veteran players, I think, have a grasp of what we want to do. And really, with technology today, you're able to make tapes with your voice on it for, say, a new player coming in. And between the combination of that as well as the players that are on our roster now, meeting with those players during the summer, I think that can give the new players that you're talking about that came in this summer at least a background or the verbiage to what we call things and why we call things and what we're going to do, so that it's not totally new when we go in there day one. So we're going to expect them to know at least the language, to understand what we're trying to get done, because they're going to be competing for jobs. I mean, there's jobs open, and we're going to evaluate. Like I said, we're going to evaluate guys and let the best guys play, and the only way you do that is by making plays, because defense is about creating matchups, and it's about making plays one-on-one.
Do you think that iPad playbook thing, do you think that helps expedite the process for them at all?
Oh, yeah. I think it's a great thing, because it allows you to get information to your players. They don't necessarily have to be here with me to do that. It's like anything, the more you can use it, I think the better resource it is. And that takes a little bit of understanding on our part, or a little bit of investigation or learning on our part too. It's a tool that I think can help you develop players, which that goes back to the second part of what I was saying is, you're talking about evaluating players, but then you got to develop players. And I think that the iPad is a way for us to develop players, because I can be watching practice and I may see, 12 to 15 plays that a particular person needs to improve upon. I can save those plays, shoot them to him with a voiceover, and, he kind of has it before the next day.
Todd, back on the targeting rules, there's been this kind of confusion, like back and forth, for instance, on whether the Clowney hit on the Michigan player would have been cause for an ejection. Are you worried that there'll be too much gray area with this?
Well, I think the biggest issue, they've made it very difficult for the officials, okay, because last year you were actually ejected from the game. It was for the next game, meaning they still called the fouls. Mm-hmm. The commissioner's office looked at those type of infractions and then made a decision. I think they've made it tough on the officials now because of the emphasis on it. And now, once the official throws the flag, it's an ejection. Now, mm-hmm. the replay guy can come back in and make a decision on whether it was or wasn't. Okay, so I think they put a lot of pressure, a lot of a lot on the officials. I think they've made their job very difficult. okay, from that standpoint. I think you've got to understand, you know, what a defensive player is and make sure it's defined so that everybody's on the same page. And then I think you need to talk to your players about, you know, the targeting area to make sure that they understand that, because if you don't, you could lose a guy for really 2 games. You could lose him for a half of the game you're playing in the next half. So, I mean, I think it's something you got to address.
You think you're worried that the officials may, knowing that it's a big deal if they throw the flag, that's an automatic ejection, that maybe they'll be.
Well, I think you got to be careful from the standpoint. It's obviously a big media conversation, so there's pressure there. I don't think anyone wants to eject a player from a game, so I think that's difficult. I think that with where the game is going and the emphasis on it has made it difficult for them too. So I think that they're in a tough spot. I think we just got to work through it to make sure everybody gets on the same page, because the NFL went through it a few years ago. Like when they had the major emphasis on it a while back, I remember that during the course of the year they would actually they finally sent out, hey, this is what a defenseless player is. And I think it's just going to be a matter of working through it to make sure that everybody gets on the same page. Obviously, they're trying to make the game safe for the players from that standpoint. So you just got to address it and understand it and move on, really.
Would you ever try to argue that, I mean, a defensive player could be a defenseless player in certain situations as well?
Well, they are. They are. There's no art. They are.
Is Wilkerson, his injury, is that cause for y'all to have to place a little more expectation or pressure on Shaq and Langley to be ready to go?
I think it's an opportunity for those guys. I mean, I think Reggie, when he was here and came in mid-year, did a really good job. He was a guy competing for a starting job. Injuries is a part of the game. It's unfortunate, and Reggie's going to fully recover from that and be fine next year. But in the meantime, it gives someone else an opportunity to show what they can do. And I think the guys that you talked about there are going to have a great opportunity to come in and see what they can. We're certainly going to evaluate them and find out what they're able to do. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we were talking about Christian Robinson and some of those guys, Mike Gilliard, and even Triad, for that example, when we moved him to safety. Are they going to be able to do those kind of things? So, that's part of it. I mean, we obviously like the ability of those players. They just haven't done it yet in a game, and until they do it in a game, in a situation like that, it's going to be a question mark.
Kind of the same line of question for inside backers, we've got a lot of true freshmen there too, who have a chance to really step in.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited. I mean, I think the biggest thing there is, Reggie Carter came in mid-year and was able to learn our system. I thought did a really good job. Now that we have Tim Kimbrough and Johnny O'Neill, those guys have begun to learn the system of what we want those guys to do, and I think it's a matter of putting those guys out there and seeing which guys can help us, right now the quickest. We've been pleased with Ramik and Amarlo and what they can do. So, we're open for competition. I think competition is good. I think, the biggest thing we're going to do is we're going to practice and compete. And the thing about football is you can't wait to get better game day because you only play on Saturdays. It's not like, basketball or baseball where you play, every other day, or you have to get better in practice. So when we step on the field, that's an opportunity for you to get better, and you've got to learn to practice and compete, and that's the things we're going to do. And if we do that, we'll be fine.
Kind of looking at Sean McGee, he's the Sam type guy.
Yeah, I think that first of all, he can do either one. He can play Sam or inside backer. We will probably start out with him at Sam in our base stuff, with the ability for him to learn our inside backer stuff in nickel. Try to cross train that way, because I still think cross training guys is a way to get your next best guy on the field. So we'll continue to do that, and to see how those guys perform when we put them out there.
Could be only like freshman inside linebacker, they cross train like you're talking about, or some other.
I think Tim and Johnny will stay inside. Sean's a guy that could swing, based upon the personnel grouping we're in, and kind of see how that goes. If we feel like he's definitely better at one than the other, then we might settle him in there after a little bit, if we get that determination. So, I think it's a matter of letting them go play and seeing how they can help us. The big thing is identifying players that can help us win. And, we're kind of, we're limited on time in some ways, but at the same time, we have a feel on some of the guys that came in the spring, which is a big advantage. And we'll just continue to evaluate and, put the best players out there.
You've spoken highly of Jordan Jenkins and his explosiveness and that. He's talked about his goal is double-figure sacks for this season. Is that realistic, Freeman, and kind of a byproduct of what you want out of that position anyway? Do you feel like that's a realistic expectation for him?
Yeah, I think the last 3 years that position has had double-digit sacks going back to Justin. I want him to be a complete linebacker. I want him to be a guy that, is very stout against the run, creates TFLs, and when you do those things, you force the team to throw the ball. That creates the opportunities to get sacks. Just like if you're on a team that's winning, and you go 12-2, and that means you're winning the game in the fourth quarter a lot, which means they're throwing the ball in the fourth quarter, which is another way that you are allowed to get some sacks. So, I want him to be a complete linebacker, and the better he does the things from a run standpoint, from a setting the edge standpoint, from a creating tackle for loss standpoint, then that allows him to become that double-digit guy that you're thinking of and doing those kind of things. So I think they go hand in hand, and I've been really pleased with his work ethic. He's everything I thought he would be, and really from the Kentucky game on, he started. And then when, Jarvis came back for the Florida game last year, he was really a starter with Jarvis, and Jarvis really switched positions.
Is his measurables comparable? I think Jarvis really didn't. He never clocked and measured all that great, right? But isn't Jordan's better?
You tell me.
Or what are is his measurables better than?
They're good.
Yeah.
He's explosive, yeah.
Todd, you mentioned Toby at the end. Is John Taylor still at the end, and who after Mike Thornton at nose tackle?
Well, I think at nose, when you look at our nose position, I think you got Mike Thornton, you got Chris Mays, the guy that came in last year, also John Atkins. That thing was written in pencil though, so there's nothing that says we couldn't erase a guy and put, Jonathan Taylor in there if we wanted to. I think that you have to have the flexibility up front to move guys around based upon the offense you're facing, and how guys are playing. Sterling Bailey and Ray Drew are guys that we thought did well in the spring. If those guys continue to flourish there, then that doesn't mean that Big John, Jonathan Taylor couldn't play inside. So I think it's a matter of how guys are playing. And I'm gonna go back to evaluate the first 10 days. We're open for our competition, and we're gonna see how some of these other guys do at the end position, see if that gives us the flexibility to play, Jonathan Taylor at nose. It's not a huge deal playing nose or in our system. That should be a non-issue. I think that the thing about John, the reason it creates conversation like you're talking about is because he is, first of all, big enough and stout enough to be a very dominant guy inside like that, but he's also athletic enough to play the ends position, which makes him really unique. So we're gonna find a way to get him on the field and make some plays.
One more question. How much of an advantage for you on defense is it to see your guys going against such a high-powered offense that have a lot of guys coming back that are working on
Well, I
their?
think anytime you can face good players and compete, then your team gets better. So, our whole thing is to practice and compete. And anytime you step between the white lines, whether it's, an individual, a group, or a true team setting in practice, particularly training camp, you have to have the mindset you're going to get better, because you can't wait to get better game day. You can't wait to get better game week. You have to get better day one, and that's going to be the approach. So if you want to be a part of what we're doing, you need to practice and play with the effort and intensity that we expect in practice. And if you do that, I think that not only makes, you know, us better, it makes our offense better. I mean, if you go back to, the best example I can probably give you is turnover ratio. I mean, we've been a good turnover team, you know, the last few years. We've had 62 turnovers in the last 2 years. And I think that that's something that we practice in practice. And I think if you do those things as far as making plays on the ball, getting your hands on the ball, trying to knock the ball out of the runner, then I think that also helps the offense, because now they have to protect the ball in practice. So I think anytime you can go against quality people in practice, it allows you to become better, and truthfully, it allows you to find out where you are. It allows you to, you know, find out what your strengths are and maybe what the things are you need to work on.
Appreciate it.
All right.